Hi, it's Steve Maxwell here, and I want to talk to you today about router tables. I get a steady stream of questions from people wondering what they should do as far as router tables go. Should they make one on their own? Should they buy a model? If they are going to buy, is it full size, benchtop? What brands do I recommend? So I'm going to try to answer all these questions for you today by showing you what I use in my own shop. There are many great router tables you can buy or build, and what you're going to see here is just what I happen to be using at the moment. But I'll explain a lot of details, and I hope some of them will prove helpful to you. I have two tables in my shop. One that you see here on the left is the full-size table, and I use that most often. I also have a benchtop model that you see on the right, and that's great if you just want to do a little bit of routing, or if you want to do some routing outside the shop. It's portable and handy to move around. So let's dive in and let me show you some of these details. The full-size table on the left is in full production mode. As you can see, it's covered in sawdust right now. That's a full-size Freud router table. I like it a lot because I think it offers a great combination of value and features. There certainly are fancier router tables on the market, but a lot of them are a whole lot more money than this one too. This one's got a good sized top. It's got miter slots in the top to accept miter gauge, and it's just a great all-around table for the money, I have found over the years. I've modified mine, as you can see here. There's a couple of features you might want to consider. I've installed a shelf, and that lets me store all my routers in one place, which is handy. My shop has a lot of stuff in it, and it's not all that large, so storage is important. I just can't put stuff everywhere. I have to have a place for everything in a compact way, and that's what that shelf you see there does. I've also put this table on top of a rolling platform. That lets me move it around a lot more easily. I've sized the height of this table so it's exactly the same height as my table saw, so it functions as a pretty good outfeed table as well. The four casters are full swiveling casters. The usual routine when you put something on casters is to put two fixed casters on one side and two full swivel ones on the other, and that lets you steer sort of like with a car. I much prefer to put the four swivel casters on because that lets me roll the thing from side to side or forward. I don't have to necessarily drive in a straight line and curve that way. So it's much handier. These casters are high quality rubber wheeled casters, and they've got built-in locks so that when you lock those things, it's just as if the casters weren't there at all. Now, maybe the most unusual feature about the router table, as you see it configured here, is the fence. And I chose this image for you because the fence there is especially designed for milling, trim, and molding. And that's really why a lot of people come to me for advice about router tables. They want to make some trim and molding. And the right kind of fence is very important. The one you see here is custom designed and built. I made it myself. It's extra wide so that I can configure it to even create some very wide crown molding using the right kind of bits. Now you'll also see there's a bunch of feather boards here. This happens to be shown with 6 feather boards in place because I'm in the middle of routing a batch of trim when those photos were taken. And I'll give you a little more information about that later. But for now, I would invite you to go to the URL that you see on the page here, realrurallife.com/routerfence, and you can download a free set of plans and instructions for building your own version of this wide-faced router table fence. It works really well. I use it all the time, and I think you'll find it a big help. So what can you do with a router table? Well, the answer is an awful lot. I would argue that a router without a table is operating at least half capacity. Having a table for certain operations really expands the usefulness of a router, and that's why I'm sure I do most of my routing in a table. So I've built my own house, filled it with furniture, did all the trim work, milled from rough lumber, and you're catching some of the glimpses of those things that I've made here. The door on the left is an insulated exterior door. The trim around it is all shop milled. Router table played a very important part in that particular project. The image here in the middle is of a staircase and railing and box newel arrangement that I built completely from rough lumber. Once again, the router table was indispensable for milling a lot of the profiles that you see here on this image. And then the photo on the right shows one of the bathrooms in our house. Router and router table had a lot to do with that as well. The cabinet there on the left, the wainscoting, the mirror frame, the window trim. None of that could have happened without a router table. So the options are really wide and varied. Now, what kind of trim can you make with a router table? Well, quite a lot actually. I could spend a lot of time explaining all of the different options to you, but just in this overview screencast, I want to point out one really neat thing that I think a lot of people find helpful when I introduce them to it. What you've got here is a not unusual situation. It's a window frame in a wall, and as you can see, the drywall sticks out proud of the front edge of the window jamb. And that's a problem because when you put trim around that window, there's going to be a gap behind the trim, a gap between the trim and the window jamb. The usual way of solving this problem is to work the drywall down so that it's flush with the window jamb, but that's an awful lot of trouble. It's very messy, it's hard to do a neat job. But what you see here is a little trick I've developed for solving that problem. If you look down right along the edge of the window jamb, you will see a small strip of bullnose trim. You can't buy strips like this anywhere, but you certainly can mill them on the router table. And I want you to notice too how it's a little wider than the thickness of the trim. And the advantage there is that it allows you to cover that gap between the trim and the window jamb. And it just saves a lot of headache. The exact position of that bullnose trim isn't crucial, so if the gap varies, it's not a big deal. You can just put it tight to the window jamb and it's going to look fine even if it's not quite consistent where it meets the front face of the trim. It's a system that works really well, and I like it a lot. Over on the left, you'll see some strips. These happen to be strips that I used as part of the trim job for the box newel staircase components that you saw earlier. One of the things about making trim on the router table is that it's very important to start with strips of wood that are absolutely consistent in width and thickness. And the thickness planer is a very useful tool for making that happen. You run your strips through all at the same time, and they're right down to the thousandth of an inch. They're all consistent, and that makes for much better results when you actually do run those strips through the router table. Now let me just give you a few last tips. It's very important that you use feather boards when you're making trim on the router table, and that's because the trim strips are often fairly small, so you don't want to have your fingers that close to the bit. But also, maybe at least as importantly, the feather boards hold that trim tight to the top of the router table and tight to the fence. So really, you're just pushing strips in one end and pulling them out the other. You don't have to worry about those strips pulling away from the fence and not being consistent in their profile. So the main thing with the feather boards is that they be adjusted just right, and you can see here how the fingers are kind of springy, and you want to adjust those feather boards so that they're applying pressure, the fingers are applying pressure to the wood, but not so much pressure that the friction makes it difficult to push those strips through. So it's just with a light spring pressure that you want those strips to be held down. And just finally, too, I want to alert you to a really neat router bit. It's shown on the right here. It's called a wainscoting bit because it's great for milling the profile on the stiles and rails that you'd need for a certain kind of wainscoting. The interesting thing about the bit is that because it's completely symmetrical in shape, it can create one kind of profile, like you see here on the left, on the rails, and then you can also produce the mirror image profile on the ends of the rails that plug into them, just by simply flipping over the stock and routing again on a router table with some kind of a miter slot, and you can use a miter gauge. It works really well. The 1-bit does all the job. This happens to be a Freud design. I haven't seen any other router bits like this before, but it's just one of the many things that you can use with your router table to make a lot of good things happen around your house. So I hope this has been of some help to you, and please feel free to contact me by email or on my various websites, and I'd be happy to give you more information if you'd like. Take care, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.